Okay, let's go ahead and get started talking about rates and unit pricing. And you may notice that I have a calculator here. This section marks the first place where we're going to actually be able to, right, I want you to go ahead and use your calculators to help you figure stuff out. Now, let's talk about what a rate is. And a rate is a lot like a ratio, except it's basically a fraction calculation. Involving measurements with two different units. And remember when I said that your units will reduce like a fraction? This means that when you have when we have two different units, we're going to need to include both units in our answer. Now, what this is going to look like is, say we've got something like, let's take a fairly commonplace thing. Say we took a road trip and we went 120 miles in 3 hours. With this, I've got 120 miles in 3 hours. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to just write this as a fraction. Again, that first number here is probably going to be our first, or the top of our fraction. So we've got 120 miles, I'm going to abbreviate that MI, over this 3 hours. And if I wanted to, well, I can just reduce this as a fraction. 120 over 3, well, that's just going to be 40. And if I wanted to, I could say that's miles, and now this is in 1 hour. This is a little bit clunky to write it like this, so what's better is we're going to write this as either 40 miles per hour. We can go ahead and use a fraction like this, or we could write this as 40 miles per hour. With this, whenever you see a calculation like this, we're going to find that first number per that second number. This unit is always going to be on the top. This unit is always going to be on the bottom. And yeah, 40 miles per hour, that's a good, solid answer. Let's do it again. And this is where we're going to say we can go ahead and use our calculators. So, because, this was nice. 120 is easily divisible by 3, but sometimes it's not going to be. But, life is messy. Sometimes we have things that aren't quite as easy. So say we've got something like 250 miles in 4 hours. Okay, well that's going to be 250 miles over that 4 hours. And I could divide both of these by 2, but honestly, it's going to be easier for us just to do this calculation. And I would say, okay, well, what is that going to be? I'm trying to get this to a point where you can see it. 250 divided by 4, and it looks like 62.5, 62.5. So our answer here is going to be 62.5 miles per hour. Again, notice we're using both of our units in the answer. If we don't include both units, it's going to be wrong. Now, if I were to do something, and by the way, with these rates, if we were to multiply this rate by a certain amount of time, I would come up with a distance. That leads us to one of our very, and this is a little bit, but it's not. This leads us to a very important formula. And because this right here is a rate that includes both miles and time, if I were to have, or this is a distance times a distance over time, I could say that my distance is equal to this type of rate times a time. I sometimes refer to this as the DIRT formula, D equals RT. Distance is equal to rate times time. Like I said, this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's going to come up fairly soon. Alrighty. Let's talk about one of the really important things that we're going to do, and we're going to talk about how we can use these in our daily life. And to do this, we're going to talk about a unit price, or sometimes you'll hear this called unit cost. And with a unit price or a unit cost, what this basically means is that we take the price per unit, and it's always going to have this. So all of our units are going to look like dollars per gallon, or dollars per pound, or dollars per ounce. If we're in a place that uses something logical like liters, this could be dollars per liter, or dollars per kilogram, or dollars per gram. But this allows us to do some fairly quick and easy comparisons of what's going to be a better buy. Well, let's take a look at like milk prices. Say I have something that's I don't know. I go out and I get a gallon of milk for $3.49 for 1 gallon of milk. That means, if I'm doing this calculation, I could say, well, this is just dollars per, this price per unit. So this is going to be $3.49 for 1 gallon. Well, it's pretty easy to see that we've got both of our units here, and dividing by 1 is the simplest thing. This is just going to be $3.49 per gallon. Dollars work a little differently because they kind of are attached to the front. It's involved in how we write this. So this actually does include both of our units. Okay. Well, let's say I have, I don't need 1 gallon, and I buy things by, say, the half gallon. Well, let's say that I've got, $1.99 for a half gallon of milk. Well, when I'm doing this calculation, this is just going to be that $1.99 over this 1/2 gallon. And it's pretty easy to do a calculation like this. This is going to be, this is going to end up being this $1.99, and I will divide this by that 0.5 gallons. 1/2 is equal to 0.5. Well, I will discover that this happens to be $3.98 per gallon. Well, so it's definitely, the price goes up. If I were only to buy half gallons, I would be paying more for the same product. This is part of that idea of economy of scale for most folks. But it also pays to watch it. Well, let's say let's say that, again, I were to say, I can do another one of these. What happens if I've got, say, $1.29 for a quart? And, by the way, quart stands for quarter. For 1 quart, which is 1/4 gallon of milk. Now, this is going to be $1.29 over this 1/4. And by the way, 1/4, I could say 1/4, that's 0.25. Oops, you didn't probably see that. So 1/4 is 0.25. Well, let's take this 1.29 and divide that by that 0.25 and see what happens. Well, it turns out that if I buy this by the quart, I would end up paying $5.16 per gallon. Okay, hopefully this makes sense. If you have any questions, shoot me a message, and I will see you in the next video.